I'll be honest, I didn't think that I was going to make it this far when I first tried to get sober. Now it's been a whole year, and I feel like I want to make a follow-up video on my last few videos that I made talking about this stuff. No, I made a couple of videos like the first month and the second month when I was sober, and then I made one talking about like not smoking weed, which was 6 months ago. And that one has blown up, which I never expected it to get that many views. And I want to just talk a little bit about like my sobriety and a little bit of like my usage, I guess, or what was my usage before that, because there was just so many comments on that weed video that I felt like I couldn't keep up with them, and I didn't feel like responding to them. Some of them were great, and I seem to have motivated a lot of people, but at the same time, it's just hard to actually deal with this stuff. And making a video, I felt like I was trying to like share my experience because other people might benefit from it, but at the same time, you kind of put yourself out there on the internet, and you're opening up anyone that take a jab at you. So it's a little difficult to navigate that. And I just want to talk about like how I'm feeling now. I smoked weed and drank alcohol since a teenager for the last 20 years, right? I had been doing that for a very large portion of my life, to the point where I felt like I didn't know who I was sober. I felt like I didn't know who I was, period, because I always had a head change. Either I was smoking all the time and then drinking occasionally, or drinking a lot more and smoking occasionally, or not smoking, because those times that I would try to quit smoking for, needing a job or whatever, I would start drinking more. But those two things are addictions that have followed me like my whole life. And it's funny because I had a few comments that were like, oh, try smoking meth, try smoking crack, and comparing it to weed. The thing is that I did a lot of that stuff. When I was younger, I've smoked meth, I've smoked crack, I've done everything but heroin. It's hard to say that stuff out loud because there's a sense of shame in it, but I will say that being sober now for a year makes it feel less shameful, because I feel like I'm finally breaking out of that identity and feeling like those things were a large part of my life. Those things were who I was at some point, and now I am feeling like I'm becoming someone different who doesn't need those things. But regardless of using and being addicted to various substances throughout my childhood and teenage years and into my adulthood and up until just a year ago, I feel like I'm not identifying with being someone who drinks or smokes anymore. And that's something that's nice, because I don't know, I always used to pride myself in being a weed smoker, right? Like I always pride myself in like being a drinker. Like I could drink with the best of them. And now I don't associate myself with that. Like when I think of alcohol or when I think about weed, I don't think of myself as a weed smoker. I don't think of myself as a drinker. I try not to put the label of X weed smoker or X drinker, or, I'm a recovering alcoholic, because I think it's better to just distance myself from that stuff rather than putting the labels of me being that at one point. I think it's better to just say that I'm not that now. And I don't know if that makes sense, but it's almost like I'm trying to trick myself into not associating myself or any part of my life with something that used to be such a big part of my life. And that's been helpful. It's crazy because the first couple months were really hard. Like the first month, let me back up. The first week was brutal. There's a few things I forgot to mention. Like I remember waking up in sweats, quitting weed and not drinking the first week. Like just my shirt was drenched, AC's on, the house is freezing. I'm just drenched in sweat. And I was very irritable. I was very grumpy and mean. My wife is a saint for like putting up with my shit, and I feel bad that I had to put her through that. It's another reason why I won't go back to drinking or smoking. I don't want to put my wife and children through that again. Things started to get a little bit better in like the second week, but it was still really hard. Super depressed, super anxious, just feeling like shit the whole time. I don't know how weed and alcohol just get such a grip on you. And like, I wasn't drinking that much, but say a few times a week, and heavier on Fridays and Saturdays for sure. You know, like not like wake up with a beer, go to sleep with a beer, but I was smoking like that. I was hitting the carts. Everybody was saying like I was saying vape, like I was hitting a vape like nicotine. No, like I was using oil. That was my main go-to because of it being more discreet. But like I was so dependent on that stuff that when I came off of it, I went through it, man. And it's weird because you just don't think that it can be that harmful. You don't think that it's going to be that hard. And then you realize, oh, all the other times I tried to quit, I went back because I couldn't get through this part of it. You convince yourself that you need it. You convince yourself that you're just that person, and then you struggle through it. And then after that first month, you feel like, oh, all right, I've made it, but I've been here before. And I remember because there's been times when I've tried to quit before, and the longest I ever went before that was, I don't even think I made it like 6 months. I think it was like 4 months, and the whole time I was miserable. And it was because I don't know if I really wanted to quit. I was just convincing myself that I wanted to. This time it felt different, right? Says every addict. But it did feel like I was ready to quit. And surprisingly, I'm here now a year later, and I've been sober. So I did it, or I'm doing it because I don't think it'll ever end. I feel like I'll feel like this forever, but it gets easier. And, 2 months, 3 months in, it started to feel easier. And I will say that around the time I made that video that blew up, which was the 6-month mark, I felt like it was finally kind of going away. The occasional desire was still there, and it's still there now. Like I still occasionally want to drink or think about like, oh, it'd be nice if I could smoke right now. But it's less and less, and it feels like it will probably be less and less moving forward, but I'm not sure. I don't know because I'm still kind of figuring it out. But I will say some of the things that I've noticed is that I just feel so much happier. Like I used to feel like I couldn't be happy unless I was high or drunk. Like it felt like that was my normal state of mind. And anytime I wasn't at the level that I felt happy, quote unquote happy with, I felt that I needed more. I felt that, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I felt that it was what was defining my level of pleasure and enjoyment. And needing a substance to put me in a certain state of mind was something that I had just accepted as me being who I was. Like it was who I am. Like I'm a weed smoker. I'm a drinker. Like this is just me. And now I'm happy or happier, I guess, and without needing it. I still have my moments where I feel shitty, and I think everybody feels that way. I think what happens is when we're used to being addicted to certain substances, we fall back to those to try to make us feel better, but they really don't. They just mask it for a little while, and then you feel even worse when they wear off, and then you continue using them because you think they're going to make you feel better, but they don't, and then you just keep getting in a worse and worse spot. And now that I'm sober, I realize that, yeah, some days are going to suck and I'm going to have a bad day because that's kind of normal, but overall, I feel good. I feel better. I feel like I finally understand myself and my mental state, which I felt like I never had a good grip on that because I was always high or drunk. And that's really good that I feel just good overall. And it sounds corny, it sounds cheesy, but I do. I mentally feel better. I physically feel better. Like working out and being healthy is a lot easier when you're not smoking weed all the time or when you're not drinking, every other day. Feel good about what I'm putting in my body and feel good about working out and having the energy to do those things, where I felt like, man, I didn't have much energy when I was just high all the time. And I was a very active smoker. Like I used to train jiu-jitsu all the time. I was working out fairly consistently. I felt like I had extremely good willpower because I went on some crazy diets when I would smoke weed, and then I would screw it up by drinking on the weekends and taking all of my calories on one day. But those were my cheat days when I would work out and smoke, and then save my drinking for Friday and Saturday nights. I laugh about this stuff and I smile about it, not because I like reminisce on like good stuff. I just kind of laugh at myself for being that way and being so attached to something that is so stupid to be attached to. Like, I don't have anything against people who drink and people who smoke. Like, if you can keep it under control and you're not addicted and you can smoke on the weekends and have a good time and you can have a couple beers here and there and have a good time, like, good for you. I can't. I know now that I can't. And I would say that that's another thing too, besides just feeling better. I have a better awareness of my mental state, like I mentioned, but I also have a better awareness of my addictions, how much those things played a big role in my life and how much those things played in like my decision making and just like things that I would do in order to find little ways to work around my weed smoking schedule, or like when I'm going to go drink, and like planning my life around alcohol and weed is just terrible. And I'm glad that I don't have to do that now. Another thing too is like, I never have a hangover. I haven't had a hangover, and I haven't woken up feeling groggy and sleepy and tired from weed in, I don't know how long, a year, right? That's how long it's been. I don't remember like ever feeling that good in the morning when I used to smoke and drink. Like, I remember mornings feeling like shit all the time, and I wake up feeling great. Like, the fact that I haven't had a hangover or a weed hangover, it's something that I am taking for granted now because I've gotten so used to waking up feeling good that it's surprising how much I was putting myself through for the sake of being high or drunk. It's weird that we do those things that we don't realize how much it's hurting us until we take them away and realize like how good we feel without them. And also just feeling good and like feeling like I'm understanding myself and understanding my mindset and my mentality and getting a better grip on my mental health. The depression and anxiety that I felt that was getting amplified by smoking and drinking has gone down quite a bit, like substantially, like to the point where I feel pretty normal. And before I didn't feel normal. I felt like I had a lot of problems. Don't get me wrong. I've got a lot of problems. I need to turn this light up a little bit, but I feel like I can deal with them now. I feel like before I was handicapped, like I was fighting with one arm behind my back while I was trying to deal with a lot of my mental health issues because of the fact that I was drinking and smoking and like just not in my own head and not clear-headed. And now I feel like I'm better equipped for taking on some of the challenges that I have when it comes to depression and anxiety that I dealt with my whole life, but I've always dealt with them under the influence. And now it feels like a fair fight. I don't know. It's strange talking about it because I've talked about some of this stuff, but it's always weird trying to get this stuff out in front of a camera and then uploading it to the internet and then knowing like what I'm going to say, other people are going to hear it and probably judge it. And like, I'm going to see the comments and the bullshit. But the truth is that many of us are dealing with shit, and many of us are hiding it by drinking or smoking or other stuff that we use to try to take our mind off of it. And we don't realize that we need to face that shit head first, and we need to be as well equipped to handle that stuff as we can. And when we are high or drunk or distracted or, trying to find dopamine in different ways, whether it's addictions to social media, video games, food, whatever, we're not fighting a fair fight and we're at a disadvantage. And now I feel like the playing field is leveled when it comes to me trying to kind of deal with some of that mental health, stuff that I was dealing with. I'm just surprised how much that stuff was actually affecting it and how I convinced myself that it wasn't. And it took a really long time of being sober to realize that I was, in fact, trying to cover all of that stuff up by, being high and drunk. And now I feel a lot better when it comes to that. And I feel just better. I feel better. And my relationships are better now. With my wife and kids, I feel like I am more present. I feel like I am less irritable. I feel like I don't need to be drunk to be happy, and eliminating that part of my life and focusing on the parts that I have here and now that are really important, and realizing that a big reason why I wanted to stop drinking and smoking was so that I wouldn't be high and drunk around my kids all the time. And now feeling less guilt about that, because there was a big guilt aspect that made me feel like a shitty father and a shitty husband because I was just drinking and smoking all the time. And I don't feel that anymore. And I also feel like I'm just happier and more pleasant to be around. And when I am around, now that I'm not high and drunk, I am me, and I'm there, and I'm aware, and I'm enjoying the moment. And I didn't realize how much the weed and the alcohol was taking me out of enjoying the moment, and how much it was making me not be a good husband and father. It really was making me be shitty. And it's funny because when I was doing it, I didn't really notice it as much. I did notice it, but I would convince myself that it wasn't that bad, and then I would go back to my old ways and my dirty little habits that were there. I would just convince myself that it was fine. And now, after being sober and kind of seeing it from the outside looking in and thinking about how I was all that time when I was just high all the time and kind of dismissive or just not present when I was hanging out with my kids, or when I was irritable because I was hungover, or I was sober, or I wasn't at the right level that I needed to be before I started getting grumpy. That sucked. And I wish I would have never put my kids through that. I wish I would have never allowed myself to do that. And I guess that we just don't see it for what it is when we're doing it. And now that I'm been sober for a while and I think about it, I'm like, shit, man, that sucked. I can't take any of that back. And that's another thing that keeps me wanting to stay on the straight and narrow, on the sober express. I feel that after all this time, after all this work, after everything that I put my wife through, after everything I put myself through, after everything I put my kids through, and dealing with all of this and working through this and getting to where I'm at now, a point where I've never been sober for a year. This is huge for me. I did it. It's amazing. It's hard for me to believe. I realize how quickly I could screw this all up if I just have one drink, or if I go and I smoke a bowl. I know that if I did those things, it would only be a matter of time before I was smoking every day and before I was drinking every day, or just back to where I was at before. I recognize it now, and I finally feel like I can say I'm an addict. You hear addicts talk about that. You hear people mention that stuff when they talk about being an addict, and when people talk about addiction. I never felt like I could admit that. And now I feel like I recognize what I was and what I am. I'm an addict. I am 100% an addict, and I can pick up healthy habits or I can pick up unhealthy habits. And I just can't enjoy one hit of weed. I can't. I can't enjoy one beer. I have no control. And you can say what you want to say. I have been able to accomplish things that a lot of people haven't been able to do. I've come from a shitty upbringing. I've made it out of the gutter. I have taught myself how to code. I've been able to start a YouTube channel. I'm traveling the world with my family. I'm doing all kinds of crazy shit. But one thing I know that I can't do is control my addictions. I just have to do my best to stay away from the habits that I know are bad and try to only work on things and pick up habits that are good for me. And when I do get that addictive personality into something, I have to make sure that it's into something that will give me positive feedback and will bring me value and will bring me good things. Because if the minute I focus that addictive personality into things that aren't good, I'll go all in on that just as I would on something that is good. But the negative feedback and the results that come from focusing on things that don't yield healthy results is never good. And I'm finally starting to recognize that if I am an addict, which I am, if I focus that energy in the right places, then I can accomplish great things. And if I focus that addictive energy in the wrong places, then I'll be right back to where I was. And I don't like who I was. Although I was convinced that that was me, and I thought that that was normal, and I thought that that's just the way things were, I realize now, after being sober for a while, that that wasn't me, and I don't ever want to be like that again. And I know that not everyone will be able to relate to this, and I know that some people might be like, oh, you're weak, you're this, you're that. I feel like I'm stronger than I've ever been. That only has come from me being able to admit some of the stuff that I've struggled with to myself. And it's even harder to say it in the camera. And I don't honestly care what people think. I share this to help the people that I know might benefit from this, the people that are going through it, the people that have similar, situations, upbringing, struggles as I have. And that's a big reason why I've started making content in the first place. And I feel like addictions and sobriety have been a big part of my life and something that I've struggled with for a very long time. And being open about this, it's got to help somebody out there. And if not, it helps me just talking about it, because I've talked about it with therapists, and I've talked about it with my wife, and I've talked about it with other people that I know personally. And just talking about it in front of the camera and putting it out there, if it helps other people out there, then it's worth talking about, because I know that a lot of the stuff that helped me get through some of those tough times when I was trying to quit all of my bad habits were hearing other people talk about when they tried to go through it and their struggles with it. And that's all I'm trying to do, is just kind of return the favor and put a little bit more of this positive content out there, because we live in a day and age where a lot of bad addictions have become normalized and become like a regular part of our day-to-day life and society, where weed can be really bad if you smoke it all the time, and so can alcohol and video games and television and social media, and pretty much anything can become bad if used too long or too much or habitually. And more people need to start talking about this, because too many of us are struggling in silence, and I'm not going to struggle in silence anymore. I'm going to put it out there for the internet to see, so that people can make fun of me or benefit from my struggles to help them with their struggles. I don't care. And with that said, that's my 1 year update. I can't believe it's been a year. Maybe I'll make an update in another year from now. I'm going to label this the 365 days of sobriety, because that makes a better title. And I hope that this video was helpful. And if it was, just, hit that like button and keep working on yourself. That's all that matters. With all that said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.